In about 20 minutes, you're going to watch a mother choose between her second husband and her house. She'll stand in her kitchen, divorce papers in hand, because the man she married made one critical mistake. He thought a dead man's legacy was his to sell. He thought a college kid wouldn't fight back. You thought wrong. This is the story of a boy who lost his father, then lost his father's memory to a man who saw dollar signs where he should have seen sacred ground. But here's the thing about grief. It doesn't make you weak. Sometimes, it makes you relentless. This is the irreplaceable inheritance. And by the end, you'll understand why some debts can only be paid in blood. Let's begin.
My dad died when I was 19. Pancreatic cancer. The kind that gives you 4 months if you're lucky, and he wasn't lucky. I'm not gonna make this whole thing about the grief because honestly, I still can't talk about that part without my voice cracking, and I've got a story to tell here. But here's what you need to know about my dad. He wasn't rich. We weren't poor, but we weren't taking vacations to Europe or anything. He worked at a manufacturing plant for 26 years. Same shift. Same parking spot. Same lunch pail his dad gave him. But that man had one love outside his family. Cars. Specifically, a 1969 Camaro SS that he bought as a rusted-out shell when he was 22 years old and spent the next 15 years restoring piece by piece. I'm talking weekends in the garage. I'm talking him teaching me how to change oil before I knew how to ride a bike. I'm talking about the smell of motor oil and old leather being the smell of my childhood. That car wasn't transportation. That car was a time capsule. Every bolt he turned, every panel he sanded, that was him. That was his patience, his hands, his legacy. When he died, he left me the Camaro. He also left me his tool collection. We're talking Snap-on, vintage Craftsman, stuff that doesn't exist anymore, and a few other pieces he'd picked up over the years. A numbers-matching Hemi engine block. Some rare parts. Altogether, maybe $85,000 in value. But the real value? You can't calculate that. You can't put a price on your dad's hands. I was a sophomore at State when he passed. About 4 hours away from home. Far enough that I couldn't just pop back on weekends. Mom was devastated. Obviously. They'd been married 23 years. High school sweethearts. The whole thing. And I get it, she was lonely. The house was quiet. I wasn't there. So when she started dating again about a year after Dad died, I didn't say anything. When she told me she was getting married to a guy named Richard after dating him for 8 months, I thought it was fast. But I kept my mouth shut. I met Richard twice before the wedding. He was fine. I guess. Mid-50s. Divorced. Worked in consulting, which I later learned meant he hadn't held a steady job in about 6 years. He smiled a lot. Made jokes. Called my mom babe in a way that made my skin crawl, but I figured that was just me being protective. Here's the thing I noticed though. The first time Richard came to the house, I caught him looking at the garage. Not just glancing. Looking. He asked about the Camaro. He asked about the tools. He asked what things were worth. And I remember thinking, that's a weird question to ask about a dead man's belongings at dinner. But I was 20 years old and I didn't want to start drama with my mom's new husband. So I said nothing. That was my first mistake. Fast forward 14 months. I'm finishing up junior year. Finals week. I'm stressed out of my mind, running on Red Bull and broken sleep schedules. I get a text from my buddy Marcus back home. I almost dropped my phone. I called him immediately. What do you mean did I sell it? And Marcus tells me he drove past a car show in Henderson, that's about 45 minutes from my hometown, and he saw a forest green 69 Camaro SS that looked exactly like my dad's. He got close enough to check the VIN. It matched. My dad's car. At a car show. Being displayed by some guy I'd never seen before. I couldn't breathe. I called my mom. No answer. Called again. No answer. Third time, Richard picks up. "Hey buddy, your mom's in the shower. What's up?" And I don't know what happened. I blacked out a little. I just asked him straight. "Richard, where's my dad's car?" Silence. 3 seconds. 4 seconds. 5. Then he laughs. This little nervous chuckle. "Oh, that old thing? We needed some cash for the roof, and your mom said it was fine since you never come home anyway. Figured you wouldn't notice." You wouldn't notice. My father's car. The thing he spent 15 years building. The last physical piece of him I had. And this man who'd been in my family for less than 2 years, sold it because he needed cash for the roof and figured I wouldn't notice. I said something I'm not proud of. Actually, I said a lot of things I'm not proud of. Richard's tone changed real fast. Went from fake friendly to defensive. "Look, I don't know why you're getting so worked up. It was just sitting there collecting dust. Your mom agreed. My mom doesn't own that car. I do. Dad left it to me. It's in the will." More silence. Then, "Well, possession is 9/10 of the law, buddy. It was in our garage. I had the keys. What's done is done." And he hung up. I sat in my dorm room for probably 2 hours. I cried. I'll admit that. I'm not ashamed. Then I called my mom. She answered this time. And she was already crying before I could say anything. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "He told me you said it was okay. He said you gave him permission over text." I never would have, I didn't. She didn't know. Richard had lied to her too. But here's the part that made me lose it completely. It wasn't just the car. He sold the tool collection. My dad's Snap-on set. The vintage Craftsman. Everything. He sold the Hemi engine block. He sold parts that my dad had been collecting for 20 years. Total estimated value of everything he took. Over $127,000. And he pocketed every cent. My mom didn't see a dime of it for the roof. Because guess what? There was nothing wrong with the roof.
Let's pause here, because I know what some of you are thinking. It's just stuff. Material possessions don't matter. He should let it go and move on. But here's what people who say that don't understand. When someone you love dies, they stop making new memories with you. They stop creating new artifacts. There are no more photographs, no more voicemails, no more birthday cards. All you have left is what already exists. And when someone takes that, they're not stealing objects. They're stealing time. They're stealing proof that your father walked this earth and loved you. Richard didn't just take a car. He took this boy's ability to sit in his father's seat, to smell the leather his father conditioned, to touch the steering wheel his father's hands shaped over 15 years. That's not stuff. That's sacred ground. And Richard was about to learn that some things you don't get to take. Back to the story.
I had a choice. I could let this destroy me. I could fail my finals, drop out, spiral into depression and let Richard win. Or I could get my dad's stuff back. I chose violence. Legal violence. First thing I did was contact a lawyer back home. Free consultation. Explain the situation. He told me something that changed everything. If Richard didn't have legal ownership of those items, which he didn't, since they were willed to you, then technically, he sold stolen property. The sales are voidable. The sales are voidable. Meaning the buyers might not even legally own what they bought. Now look, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a college kid who was studying marketing. But I understood enough to know that this was my angle. The buyers didn't do anything wrong. They bought things in good faith. But if I could prove the items were stolen, I had leverage. So I started hunting. Richard, in his infinite wisdom, didn't exactly cover his tracks. He used his real name on Facebook Marketplace. He posted the Camaro on 3 different car forums. He even took pictures in my mom's garage with the family photos visible in the background. Absolute genius. Within 2 weeks, I had identified every single buyer. The Camaro went to a guy named Dennis in Henderson, the one Marcus spotted at the car show. Paid $67,000 cash. The tool collection got split between 2 guys from a Facebook mechanics group. $18,000 total. The Hemi block and rare parts went to a collector in the next state over. $31,000. Now came the hard part. I had to talk to these people, one by one, and convince them to give back things they'd legally purchased and probably loved. First call, Dennis, the Camaro guy. My hands were shaking when I dialed. He answered on the 3rd ring. Hello? Hi, is this Dennis? The guy who bought the '69 Camaro from Facebook? Who's asking? I told him everything. I told him about my dad. The cancer. The restoration. The will. I told him about Richard. The lies. The theft. I told him that he'd bought stolen property and that I wasn't trying to threaten him, but I needed him to understand the situation. And then I waited. Dennis was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Kid, I'm a dad too. I got 2 boys. And if someone did this to my stuff after I was gone..." He trailed off. I paid $67 grand for this car. I can't just eat that. I told him I understood. I told him I'd figure out restitution. I told him I'd get him his money back somehow. And Dennis, this stranger who had every legal right to tell me to go to hell, said, "Tell you what. You get me some kind of documentation proving this car was stolen, and I'll work with you. I ain't gonna be the guy who keeps a dead man's legacy from his son." I almost cried again. Buyer number 2, the tool collection guys, were a little harder. They'd already integrated some of the tools into their shops. But when I sent them copies of the will and explained the situation, they came around. Said they'd return what they had if I could prove legal ownership. Buyer number 3, the Hemi collector, was actually the easiest. Turned out he was an estate lawyer himself. The second I mentioned the words "willed property sold without authorization," he was like, "Say no more. I don't want any legal headaches. Come get your stuff." Within 6 weeks, I had verbal agreements from every single buyer. They'd return the items. But they wanted their money back. Which meant I needed to get $116,000 from Richard. And Richard didn't have $116,000. So I sued him. Let me walk you through what filing a lawsuit against your stepfather feels like. It feels terrible. My mom called me crying, begging me to reconsider, saying we could work this out as a family. And I love my mom. I do. She's a victim in this too. Richard manipulated her, lied to her, used her grief against her. But I couldn't let it go. This wasn't about money. I need you to understand that. If Richard had apologized, truly apologized, and made genuine efforts to fix what he'd done, maybe we could have worked something out. But you know what Richard did instead? He sent me a text that said, and I quote, "Your dad's junk wasn't worth the space it was taking up. Grow up and move on. You're embarrassing yourself. Your dad's junk." After that text, I didn't feel bad about anything that came next. I hired a real lawyer this time. Paid him with student loans, which, yeah, probably not the smartest financial decision I've ever made. But my lawyer was a bulldog. Ex-military. Zero tolerance for nonsense. He filed a civil suit for conversion of property, fraudulent misrepresentation, and unjust enrichment. In normal people terms, conversion equals he took my stuff and sold it without permission. Fraudulent misrepresentation equals he lied to buyers and my mom. Unjust enrichment equals he profited from stolen property. We were seeking the full $127,000 plus legal fees plus punitive damages. Now here's where it gets interesting. Richard, predictably, tried to fight back. His defense? The items were abandoned. The plaintiff left them in his mother's house and showed no interest in them for over a year. Abandoned. Except I had the will, stating clear ownership. Text messages asking my mom to make sure the car was covered during winter. Photos I'd posted on Instagram of the car just 6 months before. Bank statements showing I paid for insurance on the vehicle. His abandonment defense crumbled in about 30 seconds during the deposition. And speaking of depositions, watching Richard get deposed was chef's kiss. My lawyer asked him point blank, "Did you have written permission from the plaintiff to sell these items?" Richard, "I had verbal permission." Lawyer, "From whom?" Richard, "From, well, I assumed." Lawyer, "Did the plaintiff ever tell you, directly, that you could sell his property?" Richard, "Not in those words, but..." Lawyer, "Yes or no?" Richard, "No." He basically admitted to theft on the record. While the lawsuit was moving forward, I was also retrieving items. Dennis, the Camaro guy, became a friend through all this, weirdly enough. He helped me arrange transport for the car. Even helped me go over it to make sure nothing had been modified. It was all original. Every piece my dad touched. When I sat in that driver's seat for the first time since my dad died, I just sat there for like an hour. Didn't even start it. Just sat there and remembered what it felt like to be 12 years old, sitting in my dad's lap while he taught me how to steer. Anyway, the tools came back. About 90% of them, some had been lost or damaged. But the core collection was there. The Hemi block came back in perfect condition. I had my father's legacy again. But Richard still owed money to the buyers. And he still owed me for what he put me through. So we went to court. We didn't actually go to trial. Richard's lawyer, who I think was also his cousin or something, real professional operation, convinced him to settle. Because here's the thing. If we'd gone to trial and won, which my lawyer was confident we would, the judgment would have been way worse. Punitive damages. Public record. Possible criminal referral. Richard was looking at potentially $200,000 plus in damages and a felony theft charge. So instead, we settled. $127,000 in restitution. Plus $23,000 in legal fees. Plus $15,000 in emotional distress damages. Total, $165,000. Richard's net worth at that moment? About $40,000 in various accounts. You see the problem. The only way to pay that judgment was to liquidate assets. And Richard's only real asset was his half of the equity in my mom's house. The house my dad bought. The house my mom had lived in for 25 years. The house where I grew up. My lawyer was very clear about what would happen. If Richard couldn't pay, we could put a lien on the property. Force a sale. My mom would lose her home. And I want to be clear about something. I never, ever wanted that. I called my mom. Told her exactly what was happening. Told her I would work with her to find another solution. Told her I'd accept a payment plan, reduce damages, whatever it took to keep her in that house. But there was a catch. Richard would have to agree. And Richard sent my mom a text that said, "I'm not giving that little expletive a single dollar. He can try to take the house. See what happens." My mom showed me that text. And then she showed me something else. She'd been going through their joint finances. And she found where the money went. Richard didn't spend $127,000 on a roof. He spent it on $34,000 on online gambling. $28,000 on a business venture that didn't exist. $19,000 on gifts for a woman who was decidedly not my mother. The rest on, honestly, nobody knows. Just gone. My mother sat at her kitchen table, looked at those bank statements, looked at me, and said, "I'm divorcing him." And just like that, Richard's world collapsed. See, here's what Richard didn't think through. If my mom divorced him, she could legally separate her assets. The house was originally purchased by my dad, her first husband. In the divorce proceedings, she could argue that Richard had no legitimate claim to it. She could also cooperate with my lawsuit instead of being caught in the middle. And she could testify against him if the DA decided to pursue criminal charges. The divorce was finalized in 4 months. Fastest divorce their lawyer had ever seen, apparently. My mom kept the house. Richard kept nothing. The judgment fell entirely on him. And since he couldn't pay, his wages are garnished indefinitely. Every job he gets, I get a percentage until that $165,000 is paid off. At his current rate, he'll be paying me until he's about 87 years old. And the best part? Because of the fraud in the affair, my mom got everything in the divorce. The furniture. The savings account he hadn't drained. His car. Richard walked away with his clothes and his debt. That was 8 months ago. Here's where things stand now. The Camaro is back in the garage. My dad's garage. I detailed it myself, using the same products he used. It took me 3 days. The tools are back on the wall. Same arrangement he had. I actually found an old photo and matched them exactly. The Hemi block is on a stand in the corner. I don't know if I'll ever build it into a car. Maybe someday. But for now, it's there. A reminder. My mom is doing better. We're closer now, actually. She apologized 1,000 times for not seeing Richard for what he was. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. Grief makes us vulnerable. Predators know that. She's not dating anyone. Says she's not ready. I told her to take all the time she needs. I graduated last spring. Marketing degree. Got a job that I actually like. But every weekend, I drive back home. And I take the Camaro out. Not far. Just around the county roads my dad used to take. Windows down. Radio off. Just me and the engine he built. Sometimes I talk to him. Out loud. Tell him about my week. Ask him questions I'll never get answers to. It probably looks insane to anyone watching. But I don't care. Because for those 30 minutes, in that seat, surrounded by everything he touched, he's still here. And Richard? Richard can't take that from me. Nobody can.
There's a lesson in this story. It's not revenge is sweet, although let's be honest, it doesn't hurt. The lesson is simpler. Some things are worth fighting for. Not because they're valuable. Not because you'll win. Not because it's easy. But because surrender means accepting that the people we love can be erased by people who never deserved to touch their memory. Richard thought he found an easy mark. A grieving widow. An absent son. A garage full of junk nobody would miss. He learned something that con men, thieves, and stepfathers of convenience often forget. The dead have protectors. And those protectors? They don't forget. They don't forgive. And they absolutely do not let go. Thanks for watching. If this story reminded you to protect what matters, hit subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.